Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the New York Botanical Garden. We begin by acknowledging that NYBG is located on the ancestral homeland of the Lenape, Delaware people. We honor them and recognize their displacement, dispossession, and continued presence. My name is Rhonda Evans, and I am the director of the Lou Esther T. Mertz Library. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this special event, which celebrates one of our most innovative recent initiatives, the Larry Letterman Photography Fellowship. Established in 2023 through the generosity of Larry Letterman, this fellowship is awarded annually to an outstanding photographer whose work demonstrates both excellence and a creative approach to landscape photography. The fellowship provides recipients with time and support to photograph the unique landscape of the New York Botanical Garden and the surrounding Bronx, one of the New York City's greenest boroughs. At the conclusion of their fellowship, each artist submits a portfolio of signed, prints, and digital images, which become part of the Mertz Library's permanent collection. And today we are accessioning the portfolio, and the portfolio was printed by one of our advisory members, John Maggiano. Over the course of the year, the Fellows' work captures the seasonal transformations of the garden, and over time, we hope it will also chart the landscape's longer-term evolution. NYBG is an ideal setting for landscape photography. Founded in 1891, the garden was chosen for its dramatic natural features, including rocky outcroppings in an old-growth forest with the Bronx River winding through it. Our living collections, ranging from ancient oaks to our azalea garden in Daffodil Hill, offer endless inspiration for photographers. Meanwhile, the Mertz Library houses thousands of books on landscape history and a rich visual archive documenting the garden since its founding. We're proud to say the Letterman Fellowship has grown quickly. For our inaugural call for applications in 2022, we received over 50 submissions and selected Nakmin No as our first fellow. Her work has since been widely celebrated by publishers and galleries. The following year, we received more than 150 applications. And this year, for 2025, we received nearly 200, proof of the urgent need to support artists' work in this field. We'll be announcing the new fellow at the close of today's program. But first, we have the privilege of learning about the work of our current fellow, Benjamin Swett. It's been a joy to have such a gifted artist documenting the garden this past year. Many of you will know Benjamin as the author of Route 22, New York City of Trees, and The Picture Not Taken, his latest book, which is available for purchase here today. A writer and photographer for the NYC Parks Department for 13 years, Benjamin also founded its Parks and Print program, which produced books, brochures, maps, and guides for parks across all 5 boroughs. His photographs are held in private, corporate, and public collections, including the Museum of the City of New York. Following his presentation, Benjamin will be joined in conversation by Dr. Eric W. Sanderson, Vice President of Urban Conservation here at the Garden. Eric is the author of the best-selling Mannahatta, A Natural History of New York City, with 3 other books on biodiversity loss and climate change. He is currently at work on a sequel to Mannahatta to be published in 2026, which will explore the ecological history of all 5 boroughs. So please join me in welcoming Benjamin Swett.
Thank you so much, Rhonda, for that really nice introduction. It was an honor to be chosen as the 2024 Larry Letterman Photography Fellow. As many of you know, I've been photographing trees in New York City for more than 30 years, And much of what I've learned about trees during that time, I've learned from the experts here, notably Todd Forrest and Eric Sanderson. A conversation I had with Todd more than a decade ago about senescence in trees, and a lecture by Eric in which he talked about, among other things, the limitations of the human ability to see nature, helped form my thinking not just about trees, but in some ways about life. I'd especially like to thank Lucas Murtahikian, the director of the Humanities Institute here, who opened up the garden for me and made it feel like home, and John Maggiato, who produced the beautiful prints from my final portfolio. Finally, I feel lucky that Mr. Letterman, a tree photographer himself, should have thought up a fellowship that offers a photographer the full range of the Bronx as a subject, and that I should receive it. I titled this talk, "Why Photograph Trees?" as a sort of challenge to myself to see what I could make of it. At first, I had thought of talking about why I photograph trees, and much of what I'm about to say can be heard as that as well. But I also wanted to take the I out of it and look at the question squarely on its own to try to understand if there is any larger purpose in this unending activity, or if it is simply a particular manifestation of a generally obsessive personality. Why photograph trees as opposed to, say, doorknobs or people? What is it about a tree that merits special attention and that is unique? Or, more precisely, what is it about photographing trees that is unique, that distinguishes it as a certain kind of photography with a certain kind of purpose? One of the main characteristics of trees, of course, as a subject, is that they're everywhere, spread around the globe in different concentrations in different places, and in forms that are both similar and different. These differences and similarities seem to call for notice, for identification, recording, collecting. I'm talking now of the pleasure of the birder, of the lepidopterist, of the archaeologist even. A book I've always wanted to make is called Big Planes, and consists of photographs of some of the large members of the genus Platanus that I've observed in different places over the years, such as this one in a village in Turkey, this one at an archaeological site in Turkey, this one in Rome, this one in Paris, this one in Connecticut, this one in the Marble Hill section of the Bronx, this one in St. James Park in the Bronx, and this one right here in the New York Botanical Garden. The pleasure here is of finding something familiar in an unknown place, but there is also the pleasure for the collector of coming across something unknown in a familiar place. I have been visiting Crotona Park since the 1990s, but it was only this past November that, wandering around one day in my capacity as a Letterman Fellow, I saw for the first time in my life a Nootka cypress. Into my digital collecting bag it went, as on different occasions did in St. Mary's Park a cockspur hawthorn, and in the New York Botanical Garden, the wonders of a small Japanese larch and a Himalayan cedar. A second motivation in photographing trees, closely tied to the documentary one, is of course the aesthetic one. The structure of a tree, with its characteristic upright form, its lateral branches, its different crown shapes, from the rounded crown of many deciduous trees to the pointed one of most conifers, its changing colors, and in the cases of deciduous trees, the often subtle ways its appearance changes from winter to spring. All present forms that cry out for capture in some way. From this standpoint, the aesthetic one, the aim is to record, of course, but just as importantly, it is to take a good picture. So the emphasis is also on the camera, what it does, what it can do, what angle it takes, what light it finds, what shapes, what qualities in sensor or film of color, of contrast, of tone, to bring out different qualities in the tree. The aesthetic challenge, the aesthetic interest, is thus a much tougher one, because suddenly you're not dealing so much with a tree as with patterns of gestures across a frame, and you're dealing with your own individual sensibility as a photographer. As my friend and mentor Harry Wilkes might put it, you're looking for something to put in your portfolio. If you think about it, though, this desire to make something beautiful out of trees, like the desire to fill one's hard drive with tree treasures from around the world, is really a selfish one, turning the tree into an object of acquisitiveness and artistic ambition, and not, in Eric Sanderson's terms, seeing the tree for itself. There's another point of view to take, however, a point of view maybe not directly about the tree, but also not really about the viewer either, but about the tree as it exists in relation. This third aspect of trees is what I call their presence, by which I mean, of course, two things. Simply being there on the side of the street, in a park, in a botanical garden, in a backyard, in a vacant lot, in a highway interchange is one aspect, to be present as opposed to being absent, bringing all the physical benefits and dangers that physical presence brings, which range from the standard health and environmental amenities we all talk about with trees, their cooling power in summer, their absorption of pollution and excess rainwater, their baffling of sound, sequestration of carbon, creation of oxygen, etc., to the dangers of falling branches, to the annual recording of information in the growth layers. But here photography of trees takes a turn, because to explain, in a sense, the value of presence, it sometimes also has to show absence. And the goal of the photographer also has to be to show a city without trees, such as in this photo of sawdust piles in the southern end of East River Park in 2022, or this one of the construction along the Van Wyck Expressway that I took through a car window 12 days ago. Immediately, regarding a city without trees, the second aspect of what I mean by presence becomes apparent. Trees influence the world around them. They have an effect, they exist in relation. They exist in relation to many things, from the microscopic to the elephantine, from the avian to the simian, from insects to rodents to fungal networks underground. But they also exist in relation to us. And in relation to us, trees are not just some faceless biological machinery, oxygen tanks lined up at the side of the road, but living things with forms that affect us, that we notice and remember. And that even become caught up in our lives. Their physical presence affects us mentally in numerous complicated ways, just as the presence or character of other human beings does. It's different for a tree than for a person, of course, but in a way parallel to that of a person. The physical form of a tree, the way genetics and circumstance have caused it to grow in a certain way, in a certain place, impresses itself on the minds of those who pass by it and see it every day, or who look out upon it from their windows. And for those who do see it on a regular basis, some of the emotions they experience during those times become attached to the tree or to the group of trees, as the case may be, and the attachment can become stronger and more complicated over time. This is a process that takes place mostly unconsciously, the way one's attachment to a neighbor whose name one doesn't know, but whom one nods to and exchanges a greeting with every day, can become quite strong and part of one's accustomed experience of life. Awareness of the depth of these attachments, unfortunately, usually comes too late, when one walks out one day and sees that the tree, for no reason one had anticipated, is gone, or learns through another neighbor that the neighbor to whom one had nodded every day has unexpectedly moved away or died. Then it is as if something of great value to you personally has been stolen from you, yet whose value, if you were to try to explain it to someone else, or, as is so often done with trees, put it into monetary terms, would be complicated, if not impossible, to reduce to the required simplicity. This aspect of the presence of a tree, because it is so personal, and because it relates so to the experience of the tree in the actual place where it grows, is a quality that requires other media than spreadsheets, PowerPoints, or even the limitations of ordinary conversation adequately to express. And though it is possible that poetry, fiction, painting, film, sculpture, conceptual works, and installations can do an even better job at communicating the complexity of such values than photography, I'm thinking now not only of Caspar David Friedrich and Thomas Cole, but also of such contemporary artists as Katie Holton, Tricia Donnelly, and Kristen Jones, and poets such as Eileen Miles and John Freeman, and who here has not read The Overstory? Photography also has a capacity to present trees in ways that do justice to their complex influences on the humans and other life forms around them. It is this quality that I've come increasingly to look for in the trees I photograph, and that draws me to photograph more, to appreciate and acknowledge the complexity of the tree's relation to the world around it. But of course, this very attempt to capture the ephemeral, powerful there-ness of a tree in a photograph still raises the question, why? Eugene Atget, the great turn-of-the-century French photographer, took marvelous pictures of doorknobs as well as of trees. I'm not saying he saw doorknobs as the equivalent of trees, but his camera did. He found the beauty in both in the service of his larger project to document the fast disappearing Paris that he had known. And so I asked myself, why photograph trees as opposed to doorknobs? Why make one's project to communicate these ephemeral presences to others? And of course, the answer is in the others, to move people, to turn them into advocates for trees, to change the idea of the value of a tree from a commodity that can be replaced to a living thing whose presence influences what is around it. We need to better protect trees in New York City. According to a recent study by the Nature Conservancy, between 2010 and 2017, the city lost 6,477 acres of tree canopy cover. That's more than 7 times the size of Central Park. Because of the natural growth of the remaining trees and some additional tree planting, the overall canopy cover still managed to increase by 3,352 acres during the period. But because of the concurrent losses, the progress was like that of a person trying to walk up an escalator that is going down. Progress can be made, but it requires huge amounts of wasted energy and time, and is a pretty inefficient way to get where you want to go. Without the losses, actual canopy growth during the period would have been 9,730 acres. The New York City Council has set an ambitious goal to increase the city's canopy cover from the current 22% to 30%, and the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice is currently developing a proposal for how to make that work. A draft of the proposal will be circulated for discussion in July. So far, most of the ideas others have proposed have involved different strategies for how to plant more trees. According to the Parks Department, however, there is a limit to how many more trees can be planted in the city, even in neighborhoods that have historically been in short supply. And in terms of those benefits of trees mentioned above, it is the bigger, existing trees that actually do the work and make a difference. At a certain point, reducing the loss of healthy, bigger trees, at least slowing down the down escalator, will have to prove a main part of the strategy. And so, ahead of the July release of the Mayor's Office report, I'll leave you with 4 steps I think the city should take to reduce tree loss. 1. Currently, municipal tree protections only extend to trees growing on land under the Parks Department's jurisdiction. That represents about 53% of the trees in the city. As the cities of Seattle and Cambridge, Massachusetts have done, New York should extend protections to the 35% of trees in the city on private property. 2. Chapter 5 of the Rules of the City of New York is entitled Rules Governing Tree Replacement. It should be changed to Rules Governing Tree Preservation, and the rules themselves should be amended to require, among other things, that no tree with a diameter greater than 30 inches and no group of 6 or more trees whose average diameters are greater than 20 inches can be removed without approval of an independent tree protection commission. 3. One of the crucial weaknesses of the city's current tree law is that its designated enforcer, the Parks Commissioner, is a political appointee who serves at the discretion of the mayor. Any projects known to have mayoral backing, and most development projects generally do, are difficult for a Parks Commissioner even to seem to stand in the way of. The City Council should create an independent tree protection commission similar to the Landmarks Preservation Commission, with real power to deny permit applications for certain kinds of proposed removals. No matter how politically inexpedient such a proposal might seem at this historical moment, such an authority, with a mandate to pursue retention of established healthy trees by helping planners develop alternative plans to removal, would go a long way toward changing the current automatic remove and replace assumptions of most designers and planners. 4. Currently, nobody is uniformly keeping track of tree work in the city. Even for trees under the jurisdiction of the Parks Department, different divisions in the agency oversee different kinds of work, and no single database compiles information about all the trees being worked on or removed at any given time. Without a single systematic tally, the agency is unable to establish how many trees are cut down in a year on its own properties, let alone for projects on private land or under the jurisdiction of other city agencies, New York State, or the federal government. The Parks Department should be given a mandate and funds to create a comprehensive, publicly accessible, easily searchable database containing information about and maps of all proposed, upcoming, and completed tree work on public and private property, including work that is part of its own capital projects. Such information access would serve the twofold purpose of keeping neighbors abreast of proposed changes and collecting data about tree work and tree removals for the ongoing use of the Tree Protection Commission and any other interested group or individual. Why photograph trees? Here's what I've come to. It's a way to communicate the positive value of their presence and the negative value of their absence, and to help bring together a constituency to work for their greater protection. Thank you very much.
So I wanted to start by asking you, how do you think people are like trees?
Well, what I was trying to say there, first of all, is that the emotions that people feel for trees are similar to the emotions one feels for people.
Yeah.
They're not the same, and
Yeah.
trees don't have eyes.
Yeah.
They're very different from us. They also can't move around. They're
Sessile.
they grow in one spot and they're stuck. So they have to adapt to the places they grow.
Yeah.
We have a bit more freedom, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. So one of those benefits of being an animal.
Yeah, exactly.
If you don't like where you are, you can move around.
Yeah, but I mean, there's also the fact that they stand up, they've got arms, and I mean, they've got limbs. We call them limbs.
Right.
There are definite connections that I think people have always felt
Yeah.
to the form of a tree
They
as
have
well.
roots.
They have roots.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love to think that, for some trees, particularly here in the temperate zone, more than half of the organism is actually under the ground. You can't actually see it.
And so much is happening down there,
And
too.
so much is happening down there.
Yeah.
Which is a lesson I've actually learned here at the New York Botanical Garden. There's things that are going on above the ground, and there are things that go on below the ground. They're
Yeah.
not necessarily the same thing, but they are definitely connected with each other.
Definitely, no. And the roots also spread so much farther than you'd expect.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things when I look at your pictures, Benji, I actually get the sense of trees as aliens, actually. In the sense that, I think that they're such a different way of being than to be a human being in this place. So much older, this idea of rootedness, that, the seed falls where it falls.
Yeah,
And it's got to make its living there regardless,
Well, I actually like that idea that you see them, there's the desire just to capture the thing itself. And I suppose when you are really focused on that, it's about this thing that I referred to you talking about a long time ago, about how hard it is to actually get outside our own busy minds to look through to what something else is separately. And that's kind of been so much the goal. And so if they look like aliens, well, maybe, as you say, they are.
Yeah. There's a quote on the whiteboard in my office from Thoreau, where it's a longish thing, but he's trying to basically make this kind of point. And the part that I like best is he says, the gardener only sees the gardener's garden, which is to say that we only see what we can, and our notions of nature are limited by our ability to perceive and understand them. Which is an idea that sort of, I think that's something we share in our work. It's something I'm also trying to do is sort of reconfigure these strange, kind of odd ideas that come out of nature that are actually the ideas, or like the reasons why the place is what it is, but configure them in a way that people can access them and think about them wherever they happen to be.
Yeah, well, that's interesting that you're talking about bringing them back, because for me, in photography, it's always there's this moment when you're taking pictures where you forget about the world on this side of the lens, and it's all about what's happening on the other side of the lens. I tend to take a long time photographing. I take a lot of pictures. I try different angles, and by the end of the afternoon, I'm so focused on the tiniest aspect of this tree, the way a branch is poking just right here, and the fact that there's a cloud up there, and there's a bird over here, and then, and I'm so focused on that, I completely lose track of time and of my own sort of. So there's a sense of
that flow,
of sort of going in that direction.
Yeah. But I can't. Also, when I look at your pictures, I can't help but notice the things that are in the background. I think that's also part of it, the sort of contrast of these, typically large trees, right? You seem to be attracted to large trees in particular, but then there'll be buildings in the background, or, structures in a park, or, sometimes it's other trees too, but I think there's, particularly in urban settings, right? There's always this contrast between these strange, ancient organisms living here with these temporary structures and buildings that are surrounding them.
That's always fascinated me. The relation. Just the relation between the different time periods of the buildings versus the trees. For this project, in the pictures I showed here, I was mainly photographing in parks and in the New York Botanical Garden.
Right, right.
So the buildings were much more in the background.
Right, right.
For my book I did in 2013, I had a lot more actual street trees with buildings and things like that. And there is this sense in the city that the tree has its own history in relation to the history of the buildings, and it can sort of give you access to the place in a way.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you another question. How does a tree relate to a forest?
I should be asking you that. Well,
because your books are about trees.
Well, okay, but we call this our urban forest.
I know, but what do you call it? What do you think? How do you think of it?
I think of it as an urban forest. I feel like, and this is actually something I talked about with you years ago when I was doing my other book, about how in New York you have all these, there were all these native trees and plants that were growing here before the city was built, and some of them have stuck around, but there's been a lot of planting of trees, both of, native ones, but a lot of sort of trees from all around the world. So the whole city has eventually become almost a kind of specialized ecosystem of its own, maybe. So it's a kind of we refer to it as the urban forest. Maybe it's an ecosystem, maybe it's. But I feel like the trees in New York have to relate to each other in the way trees in a forest do, but they maybe do in different ways. I don't know if that is specifically.
No, I don't know. There's no right answer to this.
No, I'm not. You're now making me
fishing
think
for anything in particular, but I think, I'm a very amateur photographer next to you, but there is this thing about photography where you're selecting something out of the landscape and putting priority on that, right? And so, you're putting that priority on trees, but trees are part of society. It reminds me a little bit of those Humans in New York book, right? Which are, all these individual stories of individual people, and yet it's a selection, obviously, and you could have made another selection, and yet somehow you get a sense of them, of all of society, by reading them.
By looking at all of them together. Well, I think that's very much kind of what it becomes. I mean, this idea of the forest also, I'm thinking about the forest outside the city. When you leave New York and drive north, you think, why worry about a tree or two in New York when there's so many trees growing up along the Taconic State Parkway or something?
Why should you do that?
Yeah, why should you?
Yeah,
well, because...
I'm playing the devil's advocate here, but...
Well, because, for one thing, because there's so much fewer of them in the city, so they do so much more. And I think also
on
because...
On a per tree basis.
On a per tree basis. And I think also individual trees do come to mean more to people in the city because there are so many fewer of them.
Right. And occasionally there's some that are really, really large, right? So, and that too, I think, because in trees, size tends to reflect age, and trees have a lifespan. Many trees have lifespans that are very different than the human lifespan. Because I think that's another way to see it. There's what you sort of see in space around you, and there's what you see in time over the course of your lifetime, right? And to think that there are these living things in the environment around you that transcend your life, that are much older than you and will be, older still, like the mother tree, just out front here.
The mother tree here, or once in Inwood, there's that amazing ginkgo in Isham Park. And I was photographing it, and this guy came up to me and said, and started talking. He said, "Oh, you're photographing the tree? Well, my grandfather remembered that tree,
right?
And I used to walk under that as a little boy, and this goes way back." And then he was showing me underneath the tree there's a milestone from the old post road and the wall, and suddenly all of New York history was connected to that spot in some way.
Yeah. One of the things we're doing for my new book is sort of thinking about how the forests have changed over time, like since the last glaciation. And I think that, there's been many kinds of forest here, boreal forest and spruce forest and hemlock forest and pine forest.
Oh, that's right. That's a good one.
and-
So this current forest is just one of many. In other
Yeah,
words.
well, from a forest ecology perspective, the forest is not a constant thing. It's constantly in transition, and what's interesting is the factors that are, pushing it one way or another. Yeah, you're making a strong argument around conservation of trees. As opposed to restoration, which is also an important aspect of it. And, that's something we think a lot about here, in the Thane family forest, right? Which is, as far as we know, the only uncut forest in all of New York City, the only place that was never a clear cut. And yet has clearly changed. And because there's been a botanical garden here for the last 100 years, we actually have quite a bit of information about how it has changed.
Yeah.
But also lots of questions about why it changed in those ways,
Well, I mean, you lost the chestnuts and the hemlocks and various.
Yeah,
things.
so there's disease things going on. There's trampling things going on.
Is anything new ever planted in the forest, or is it all only?
Yeah, they do some restoration. They do some plantings in the forest, yeah. And there's a lot of like invasive species control going on.
Because one of the things that I think about in terms of ways of one of the reasons not to cut down trees in the city is one of the arguments for cutting them down. For example, the removal of trees in East River Park was that many of them were not adapted for flooding or climate change, and if you cut them all down and replace them with ones that are more adapted, they'll be better suited to the place.
Yeah.
But the question I have is, isn't it better to leave trees standing until they die naturally and plant new ones around them?
Yeah.
And then the new ones will have a chance to grow before the old ones go.
Yeah.
And then they can become the replacement trees rather than this sort of slash and burn approach.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Well, of course, when I think of that project in particular, I think that's all salt marsh and sand. But
Right, of course, yes, that's true.
That's the reason it's flooding, right?
Yeah,
because
well-
it used to be very low, and there were no trees there except there
Yeah.
was a little island there that had a couple of trees on it 400 years ago.
No, it was the biggest salt, didn't you say it was the biggest salt marsh in?
Yeah, on the Lower East Side
Lower
for
East Side,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Not as big as Jamaica Bay or some of the things on Staten Island, but that's right. We've Todd Forrest, you mentioned, has been dealing with that here with the tulip tree LA, right?
Right, yeah.
Which is one of those trees in the big trees that used to be in front here was hit by lightning, and they saw that it was getting near the end of its life, and so they checked all the other ones, and the plan was to have a sort of successional plan, just like you're talking about.
Yeah.
But then with climate change and other conditions, they decided we just need to do it. And so, if you look at pictures from 1903 of this building, it looks a lot like it does right
now, I'm sure, yes,
The mother
exactly.
tree and then these, smaller trees. And 100 years from now, those will all be huge trees again. Like,
Right,
we
like
all
they were
remember.
recently, yeah. I remember that,
So, one of the wonderful things for me about trees is they make us think in these terms, right? Forest, even people that are about trees for extraction, they're always thinking in these long-term cycles.
True.
That is very different from, most of the other kinds of investments that we make.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me ask you a couple of photography-related questions. How do you choose which trees to take pictures of, Benji? So many trees. How do you choose?
The way I choose to take pictures of anything, I mean, literally, I'm walking along and I see something out of the corner of my eye.
Oh, yeah?
It's just like a shape or a form or a shaft of light or some little something unusual. It's really the best pictures are usually not ones necessarily that you're seeking. You know that little picture of the Japanese larch that I showed that was glowing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
I just saw that from far away and had to get closer.
Because it was like glowing or something.
It was glowing, yeah. I mean, things like that you notice. There's and then the picture in St. Mary's Park of a Japanese pagoda tree. It's a very tall tree,
Yeah.
and there's two little people down on the side there.
Yeah.
And one of the things about the way I take pictures, actually,
Yeah.
to get into this a little more,
Yeah, please.
is I'm someone who, as Catherine, my wife, says, I tend to go narrow and deep
Uh-huh.
in things. I
You're
I
like
always
a
wish I
taproot.
was somebody who was someone who was shallow and
You don't wish you
went
were
everywhere.
shallow. Come on, Benji.
but who went everywhere. But I tend to go narrow and deep. So for this project, I ended up, there were two things that ended up being my sort of main parameters, one of which was the number 5 subway line. And I found that I wanted to go everywhere on the subway to take these pictures, just because the mandate was to take pictures in the Bronx.
Yeah.
And I felt like I'd like to be able to just go and not drive somewhere and, I don't know, not have it be an imposition, but be part of the city.
Yeah.
So the number 5 subway line is very convenient to St. Mary's Park, to Crotona Park,
Yeah.
and the Botanical Garden, actually, the East Gate. And so that became my center for taking these pictures. So I went back to Crotona, St. Mary's, and the Botanical Garden a lot. I also branched out on the number 6 to Pelham Bay Park and went to some other places. So at St. Mary's Park, though, where that Japanese pagoda was, I really loved that tree.
Yeah.
And I kept photographing it from above, looking down towards the playground, and I was trying to get the right angle, but from that angle, it never was working right.
Yeah.
And then one day I was walking up, and I just saw it looming up above me, and there was this beautiful sunlight on it. And so I got out my camera, and I was just about to take a picture, and there was this man straddling a bicycle there, and he said, "Get away from here right now."
Huh?
And I didn't know what he was doing in the bags of his bicycle, but I thought I'd better not find out. So I did a whole circuit of the park and took a lot of other pictures, some of which I showed here today. It was an amazing afternoon. And then I came back around to the Japanese pagoda tree. And he was gone, or I thought he was gone. And I went up and I discovered, having gone around, an even better angle on the tree because of the way the sun was and the way it was lighting everything up. It was kind of perfect. So I just started taking pictures, and then I suddenly saw him again. But he, this time, had gotten on his bike, and I watched him slowly bicycle away down the winding paths of the park and disappear. And then I took my picture.
All right.
So that's kind of how I come to end up taking a picture, is, you know. And so, but I also to me, I have to spend time in a place, and I got to know St. Mary's Park really well. And having not been there, because when I worked for the Parks Department, I'd been there years before, so I was familiar from that sense.
Is there a time of day or a season that you prefer or don't prefer? Or how do you think about that?
Midsummer is maybe the worst.
The worst? Because
Just
of
because,
the light?
only because of the light.
Of the heat?
Because of the light and the heat. But the truth of the matter is, it's usually the end of the day is better, I like. And because of the circumstances of my life, I wasn't able to get there early in the morning. So I generally tended to go in the, between 4 and 6 or 3 and 6 or something like that.
But of course, the trees are also responding to the light, and particularly to the season. Especially in our environment, right? Many of our trees are deciduous, and so they're doing different things at different times of the year.
Exactly. And sometimes just sitting there absorbing the heat.
Trees are big. So how do you? One of the problems I always have when I try to take a picture of a tree is like, how much of the tree to get in?
Oh boy, that's a big question.
Like, how far back do we really need to go? But then, of course, the farther back you get, the less detail, right? So
it's a big problem.
it is a big problem. Yeah.
I started photographing
trees. The New York guy doesn't have that problem, right?
Excuse me?
The humans in New York guy didn't
have that problem.
Yeah, all his things are about the same size. So.
I started photographing trees in the 1990s for a guidebook to the great trees for the Parks Department, and that's what started me off doing it.
Right.
And I quickly realized about this problem. And eventually, because I started to become obsessed with photographing trees, I settled on photographing with a Hasselblad with a very wide-angle lens, but with a tilt adjustment. One of the problems with photographing tree is that you have to look up.
Oh, yeah.
And if you look up, the natural thing in a camera is for it to look like the tree is falling away.
Right.
So this perspective control device corrected for that
Ah.
and allows you to look up with the tree staying up.
Ah.
And so I, with a wide angle lens and that, I did all my photography for my previous book.
Huh.
And then at a certain point, I was sticking with the Hasselblad for as long as I could. But it was becoming apparent that I could get away with not having to scan everything if I had a digital camera.
Uh-huh.
So I found a way that I found a very high megapixel Canon, and they had a very wide angle lens that was this tilt shift.
Oh, cool.
And so I found I could use that, and then I actually, for my photographs now, to get even more in than you normally could, I actually take 3 pictures
Oh, okay.
and I stitch them together.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh.
So each of these photographs you've seen is a stitched together photo of 2 or 3 of these
Tree
images.
photographers take note.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my technique.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Well, I have one last question, and then if people in the audience have anything they want to ask, we should give them a chance.
Yeah.
But what comes next for you, Benji? What trees are on your sight line or on the edge of your eye, or is it not trees?
You know, I'm working on a book that is about this year in which I was documenting the loss of trees in East River Park. And
The piles of sawdust we saw.
the piles of sawdust we saw, exactly, which is still going on. If any of you have read my work, aside from this more tree-oriented, specifically one, my work tends to be quite autobiographical. So this is a sort of an autobiographical book that will include photographs about this year in my life.
Okay.
Very connected to the park and connected to other things going on.
Wow. I look forward to that.
So that's that's the project I'm really working on. But for various reasons also, I actually had to be away from New York mostly for a number of years. We had a fire in our building and we couldn't be there. There was the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so because of this Letterman Fellowship and because of the number 5 subway, I've been re-immersed in just going out to take pictures around the city. So what I'm really looking forward to photographically is some other subway lines.
Nice. Nice.
And seeing where they take me.
Wow. Well, letters maybe.
Letters. Yeah, exactly. The letter lines.
Yeah. Well, shall we all thank Benji for his beautiful pictures? And
Thank you.
for being all with us?
Thank you very much.